Hello, my name is Deborah, and I'm from. Are you hearing me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm like too. Or maybe they are too loud. Okay. So, hello, my name is Deborah. I'm from Radiona, which is a Zagreb makerspace and hackerspace. Thank you for the organizer for accepting my talk. It's going to be a little bit different than the talks that you are used to here. So let's call it from the category no-brainer. And I won't be angry too if you will use this as a lunch break. So this is going to be a talk about what we do, what we did from 2011 when Radiona was founded. I'm so sorry for this design. I'm hoping that designer in our lab won't kill me because I'm using something that is very like Web 2.0 design. But this is what I usually present when talking to people who are not so technology skilled. But basically, it sums up what we do and what we plan to do. So lately, there is a lot of talk about STEM, and things like that, and it's pretty much in the mainstream media. So Radiona was basically, is from the beginning something that was combining science, technology, art, and creativity. And it was a combination of technologists and engineers, but jointly with designers and artists. And this is how we were founded. So basically, what is very interesting for us is that in what the Wikipedia says that what is a hackerspace is a place, is a community of people, who are having in workspace where they work in the field of technology, science, electronic art, but basically connecting people together. What we do in Radiona is basically connecting unconnectable in a sense, and this is always kind of very challenging for us because there is this technology kind of vocabulary and art and design vocabulary, and there is a huge gap between. So we try to use education and creativity or just hanging out together, solving the problems to decrease this gap. So basically the foundations, of course, what the majority of you know, who are probably more into even technological activism, is that the foundations were the C-Base from Berlin, and the Meta Lab, which is also considered one of the best hackerspaces in the world with 2,000 members, and it's really something like that we can only dream about because in Austria, they're really like very disciplined, the same as the London hackerspace too, because these are spaces in huge cities. The mentality is different. People are used to pay monthly fees, and these are systems which are self-sustainable. I have added also Noisebridge with San Francisco. Many of you that are visiting the Chaos conferences probably know Mitch Altman. He will be next year a guest in our lab at the end of March, and because we want him to share his experiences how to make really sustainable things, because today people like to talk about self-sustainability, but then when it turns out if you need some space, you want to have a community, there are some practical problems. You have to pay the rent, you have to pay the bills, so how you're going to do it? We are organization in the field, basically, of culture, merging all of these art and culture and technology together. Without it, it wouldn't be possible. Because on the other side, sometimes we are also invited by some hubs that are here that like to deal also with technology. It's something that we really respect about it. But then again, if you don't want to be only business-oriented people, but you just want to have a space for education, for hanging out, then this concept of startups and things like that is not so, I wouldn't say acceptable, but it's not something that you want, because it's simply like like many of you work as programmers, as technologists in your companies, and in your spare time, you don't want to spend the time in the afternoon, hanging out with the same people with a beer and doing something with electronics for your leisure time, being in a space that looks like a company. You want something different. You want something what we usually do, doing off the grids lab, going to the mountains together and things like that, or doing soldering picnics in public spaces, in parks. So you have to reach also your audience, because For the majority of people here at the faculty, this is something that is your surrounding. What we are doing is a mainstreaming technology, also mainstreaming art and culture. So the term hackerspace, as many of you know much better than me, was very often misused in mainstream culture. It was many times misused in the media itself. But I think the term happened also in 2013 when it was basically when they put it into the Oxford Dictionary. So it's something that doesn't have only a negative connotation. You know, parallel with that also happened the maker scene, which was connected with the Make magazine, and that was something more mainstreaming, more connected with schools and education. Something what we had here in the previous times, what we called the technical culture. So this is the artsy side of what we do, basically, is that we also like to go to the flea market, and Hrelić is absolutely amazing flea market on the Balkans, one of the best, you know, and if we combine it, what we like to do is like finding pieces of electronics, vintage pieces of electronics or anything what we can hack and reuse for the works we present at the exhibitions. So basically, the MoMA is the Museum of Contemporary Art in New York. So I'm making this parallel of how we should demystify the art world, at the same time demystifying technology world. So garage science and basement playground, we are very interested in these people who are like really shyly doing their hacks at homes, you know. Oh, I'm sorry. So you see, we have a heritage. You might not use very often this term. We have vintage technology. We have technical museum that has something. You have science museums and science centers and centers for popularization of science in the world. So we have heritage in our own culture. And that was the magazine Sam Svoj Majster. So the DIY culture was part of our culture. It is not something that we should reject or we should laugh. It's something that we have to come back again, doing something with our hands. And as you see today, today is the day that people are going to discuss about curriculum and about education. So it is very important to accept these things that the newer generations are not developing their skills enough. So we have generations that are not aware of some specific fields. This is also something from the flea market. So mainly what Radiona does is like dismantling thing. If we are, again, putting back together these things in the same way, I'm not quite certain and I won't guarantee, but it's about the challenge of, like a previous colleague mentioned, tinkering, the term that last couple of years came into our vocabulary. So the history of Radiona, which started in 2011, but it was based in a student center as the IMM Media Lab. We were not very happy with this name, but it was kind of a result of the workshop that was first Arduino workshop in Croatia, but it was a part of revitalization of the MM cinema in student center. This is why we had to use this MM. So in 2013, we started our own lab on our own. So what are our activities? Sorry, I think usually bilingual, so this is why I'm combining both languages. So workshops, the lab started as a workshop situation. Always after workshops, we had some kind of need to showcase what we did. You know, you have conferences only once per year, so you need to make an exhibitions. And exhibitions were very interesting for us because engineers, programmers were able to present their work in the spaces where they didn't have they needed some connection to get there. So with us, it happened that we said, like, okay, if you want to exhibit something, it's not necessary that you should be an artist. If you want to present your work, okay, we will set up an exhibition in the museum like we did with the Technical Museum, and so far we were in many galleries. And it's very nice when people have this feedback, getting feedback on their own work. Sometimes they're very geekish. Sometimes we try to go into the in the field to communicate more. So what is the essence of our work is basically how to communicate out the ideas, the technology ideas, which are sometimes not not understandable to the mainstream peoples. It is part the way how we develop the audience. If you wait the audience to come to you, nothing's going to happen, even for your product. So sometimes you have to go there. Sometimes you have to be enough to go to public space, to a little bit provoke the situation. Of course, as an activity, we also have an audio section that has been very strong, building synthesizers, building amplifiers, effects, within many international workshops we had. So we also had a band which performed, like we had 15 people on the stage. On device art, you know, as after a couple of years, the band a little bit decreased the number of participants because of the demandings, but it's very interesting that you have people who really want to build a device, and you have an electronic composer, you know, from the Music Academy, joined together without any ego issue, just like, let's hang out, let's sometimes make a good sound. At the beginning, it was a noise electronica, and we were really harassing the audience on many festivals, and it was really, but after some time, people learned, you know, to build their instruments, to listen a bit what they are doing, because with oscillators and everything, it's really rough and sound, and after some time, you know, you could see how people basically developed personally. We also do some European project that you will learn about lately, and we have residencies. Residencies is, since we are a space that has many tools, you know, and many possibilities. We accept people if they want to work for a couple of months, you know, or even more. If they want in the free time, they need some space and some tools to work on their projects, we invite them. So far, we had domestic projects from wide range, for makers in residence, hackers in residence, designers in residence, but we also had, like this year, a pilot writer in residence, but this, in our case, was not functioning because obviously the writer didn't have, was not very inspired what it saw. Maybe, I don't know. And we organize also hackathons. So our targeted groups are kids, youth, students, hackers, artists, designers, DIY enthusiasts, engineers, activists, futurologists, curators, older people, and as I bolded here, regular people. This is like ordinary people, because of course it sounds so vulgar, but we are not really interested to be like a very exclusive company of people. We want people from the street. This is why we also go to them. This is how we try to communicate this out. It's it is not so easy to make and to build the community in Croatia. I have to admit there are many things happening now. In Zagreb, there are basically 3 hackerspaces. It's Mama, who was the first one, and it was a software-based. Then it's a Hack Lab 01 in Medica, which is gaming more, and we are the younger. And the most, we were founded in 2011, but we were hardware-based mainly, because personally, I try to go to all of these hackerspaces, but I realized that sometimes there is a problem if you have people who are deeply into Linux and into in terminal, and sometimes are not able to explain very simple things, like for normal people, like you have operating systems for normal people. So there is, like I mentioned, this a problem with communication around this. And of course, what we do is like, when, for instance, we bought Dr. Bomb organs, you know, on the website Njuškalo, and we try to make a restoration of these huge, massive organs. So on this way, we just found a guy who was like really having his apartment full of vintage organs, and he was one of the first in Yugoslavia that was buying, you know, in secretly synthesizers during the 60s, when it was not easy and it was not allowed to import this, you know. So this is kind of the thing that also interests us, you know, like discovering these kind of people who are really maybe too shy, who are doing this at home, not because of getting a new fame or something. Like, let's do some shared spaces, you know. And of course, supporting the most domestic forces, because at the beginning of the lab, we were mainly having international guests, because we wanted to have certain new knowledges, the mainstreaming of all of these topics that you see here, like the biohacking, which was very, very popular. We always had like 30 people at the workshop. It was totally crazy, so combining biology and electronics. And Arduino and Raspberry Pi that you listened yesterday, Goran's talk here. He was doing also Raspberry Pi, very successful Raspberry Pi workshops, and Igor Brkic, who basically is the first initial with Ivan Marušić-Cliff for the lab, you know. So there is really a mesh of all of these energies, synergy of many, many different professionals, you know. And of course, what I find crucial here is this combination of high-tech and low-tech. It does not necessarily mean that we like also vintage technology, we like also these mechanical devices, you know, everything that could really lead you to do something with your hands. And of course, we like to have a lot of women in the lab, because we are like 50%. Less is women engineers in the lab, and more is from the art side, from the arts and humanities, from design, from fashion. They come for very different visual arts and things like that. Okay. So you see, this was the first biohacking workshop that we did. We hacked what you already know from the Instructable setting. It was hacking the webcam into the digital microscope. Yeah, but it was 2011, and it was super successful, having like people from the faculty of biologists, you know, and it was really super nice. And circuit bending with Technical Museum, and of course this is Davor Andrijevic's Arduino. It was the Croatian version of Arduino. It was before Arduino, I have to say, that Davor has his, you know, legacy into this. And this is Ivan Marušić-Cliff. As you probably know, if you are visiting new media exhibitions in Croatia, he is working for like 3 decades with TVs. This is the first. He is an artist. Was taught in audio things, but he was hacking televisions, like, and this is the way how he's been expressing himself to the whole of his career. Now he's been doing a lot of it, Kinect and Max MSP. And as you can see here, there is, what we like here is this diversity, and this is how I have to come back when I mentioned the noise bridge from San Francisco. Is something what we took from there, basically, is this anti-harassment policy. It's the policy that a couple of labs in the world have, that we are not allowing harassing people in our spaces based on anything, like ethnicity, like the knowledge, like the expression, like the age, the way people look, the way they want to express themselves, the way of their sexual orientation, religion, and everything. We just don't care. We just don't mind. We just, and we don't label our lab in that sense in any way. So it's completely open, but harassment in any way is simply not allowed. So as you can see here, you have diverse people, completely diverse people here. You have an engineer who is obviously leading a workshop, but you have a girl who's been doing in medical sound. One was a fashion student. This is economist. This is a visual artist, you know, and this is the youngest participant that was in Philip in our workshops, you know, coming with his dad. So diversity is crucial for having these kind of spaces, open and shared spaces. As we do many exhibitions, you see here the work, the gaming device made by Igor Brkic called Letva. This was in the City Museum of Varaždin. And usually on our exhibition in technical museums and galleries, we have younger audience. Sometimes they're hipsters, sometimes they're small kids, sometimes, you know, it's different. But this was a typical City Museum Varaždin audience. These were all retired people. And it was super cool to see them, you know, playing. We presented mainly their gaming devices, DIY gaming devices. And we were totally, and it was the first time that we had to open an exhibition by talking, what we usually don't do. And because we needed to explain to them what is this all about, you know, because usually they see photographs or paintings on the wall. And And as you can see here, you have like 65, 70 plus people playing games and being totally open to this new technology. It was their area, the museum was their area, you know. So this is the foundation of Radiona. It's of course the open source hardware. The workshops you see here, these are people that visited from 2011 our lab. For Mark, he will be here the next weekend in Technical Museum. He is a biohacker. I have to say that all of these guys influenced also our lab in a sense of that they shared their experiences. Mark often works with hackerspaces in Indonesia. And they don't want to be called even the makerspace because they don't like what the makers became for the last couple of years also. Like the maker fairs in the world, you see, also decided to work with the Ministry of Defense. So some people from the hacker scene, from the maker scene, does not support this kind of thing, and they think that open source should be for the value of people, you know. And one of these, and many of these people are basically on these foundations, you know. Last year was really like the explosion of our guests from audio point of view. We did like really 4 or 5 massively good guest appearances in the lab. You know, from Netherlands, from Russia, from Ireland. We want to have very diverse guests too. Recently, we had Phil Healy. He's been doing things with people with disabilities. This is the next thing. We are very interested in making devices, you know, that are people that are really having like the cerebral palsy, like multiple sclerosis, people that can move only one finger, you know, and things like that. We want to work in that direction, you know, because they're very active. They are probably more active and more interested than we are. As you can see here is result of the workshop of dirty electronics. You know, we had a presentation after this. This is the interactive side of all of these workshop, is that we also invite people to make a presentation of it, to talk about it, to express themselves. In the workshop we had 2 years ago, it was one of the first workshops on drone in Croatia. Now all of these places are full of these drone races and things like that. This was a very good experience because everything in these lasers were DIY. This is day done there. And you see here, it was also DIY 3D scanning. We presented 3 methods. As you can see here, Igor, Damir, and Goran, all of them, they did like 3 different methods of 3D scanning. And I was checking when we were doing this 2 years ago, it was the second in the world DIY 3D scanning workshop. So we were really happy. I'm not quite certain if the organizers appreciated it very much in that point of view. This is the results. These are also, this is a workshop by Vedran Relja, who's been amazing guy doing with theaters, stuff for theaters, Kazalište Trešnja, for instance, and for artists. When you have some interactive installation in the Museum of Contemporary Art, you can know that he has his eyes or hands on this. This was robotics noir. I want to come back now to this importance of merging this STEM, so STEAM, so merging arts and humanities jointly with science and technology. What you do is about the creative aspect of it. You know, the scientific researchers really came to the conclusion that people who were learning to play an instrument were basically much better in resolving mathematic assignments. So you see there is an importance of developing the artsy side of people. In Helsinki, for instance, or in Finland, they have a very good educational system because the cultural education is the basic of all education. So when you have small kids, doesn't matter if you are talented for drawing or playing or something, it's not very important. It's just like that you develop a certain skill that you are not even aware of it. And later on, when you decided to be a programmer, you know, it turns out that your brain functions a bit different. It develops a thing, you know. So this is what we are doing, combining really like different things in these areas, not being afraid of entering something that sometimes we don't know if it's going to, how the result is going to look like. So it's learning by doing, it's learning through mistakes, of course. And it's something that it's at the edges of the comfort zone, because the comfort zone is very boring and it's not, I don't think that any scientist in the history was in the comfort zone, you know. But at the other hand, when you look the history of science, you can see that many of them basically, many Nobel winners of a Nobel Award came to the conclusion in completely different situation, not when they were working, some of them when they were dreaming, some of them when they were doing some art thing. That's a very interesting thing that happens when you realize that they were doing for so many years some research, and then they came to some conclusion in some completely different situation. Here you can see the visuals of our performance, our exhibitions. We have really great designers in the lab, and we take care a lot about the layout, I have to say. This is the only thing, when you have designers, then you cannot have DIY design look, maybe in pieces. But last year, we had the exhibition that was, of course, dedicated to Mr. Alan Turing. There were not many exhibitions, and Igor was the main guy who did this, you know, and we were really like touched in a way how it was presented in the Gallery Miroslav Kraljević, which is a gallery for contemporary art. And at the opening, we had really interesting feedback from people who were running the gallery. They told us, like, we never saw these people in the gallery. We said, like, yeah, we either. But we were really happy to have different people coming and checking, you know, something that was like completely from the other field of what a gallery was supposed to do. What we like to do is that people at our exhibition can touch devices. We don't like to do, you know, something that has been like when you come to the museum, you always have this prejudice that you have an object and you are not allowed to touch it. This is what we don't like. If it's it's going to break. So let people play with the devices, and let's make it interactive in many ways so people can play. This is Sintomir was a kit that was designed by Damir Prizmic and by Igor Brkic. I don't know how many times did I mention you, but you're the kid of this house. So it was awarded last year by design professionals, and it was presented at the Venice Biennale of Architecture. We were very proud of Sintomir. You can check on our website everything, and you can order it. The last project we did was with the CAP Science, which is a Bordeaux-based institution for the promotion of the popularization of science. We are doing creative museum for last 2 years, so connecting museums, makers, hackers, and technologies. This is the majority of this project, you know, and we did a very successful conference at the beginning of March in Zagreb. It was after these cities, it was the biggest. We had we outnumbered all of these cities. You know, we had 138 participants at the workshop. The last thing that for the future of the lab, this is Phil Healy, you know, and these are people with disabilities, you know, at the workshop who were able at the workshop to play the instruments, and we joined together. High school kids from mechanic school Faust Vrancic in Zagreb as volunteers, because we wanted to have them all together to raise the awareness in children, in youth, how important it is to work devices for people with special needs. You know, if we talk about inclusion, it's 2017. We should be inclusive in many ways. So yeah, this is the next thing what we are going to continue. So inclusion, sustainability, community building, strategic partnership, spontaneity, and of course anti-stress, because we have terrible program. Thank you very much for your patience. Whenever you want to come, you check radiona.org. And I don't think we have time for questions, and I have to come back to work because this is my lunch break. So my peers are here from Radiona. Ask them all, they know much better. I have to run. Thank you very much.
Thank you.